You know, it's clear when you listen to all the stuff that Santosh was just talking about that the world is changing. And we all believe it's changing for the better. But we're not entirely sure how. But it's the people in this room, all of us in this room, that will be the people who figure out what that means for India. And it's kind of fun when you think about that, to think about that we are at this moment in time where we're the ones who have to figure that out. And the challenge for somebody to get up after Santosh and speak is to think about, what do you present? Because there's so much we could talk about as it relates to social. So I'm going to try to be a bit more specific about how some of the things that he talked about today work and how they work on Facebook. I'm not going to spend lots of time talking about the social revolution because I think he did a good job covering that off. But we can take questions on that as well. Now, he mentioned Marshall McLuhan, which is interesting because we talk about him a lot at Facebook because he was a bit of a social visionary. And one thing that's going on around us right now is he had this point, which is that as the cost of communication, over time, the cost of communication will continue to drop, and it will drop exponentially. Now, what's interesting to the telephone, to the internet, and on to mobile, the fact of the matter is every single person in this room is connected via multiple devices to all of the people around them. And that wasn't possible just a few years ago. Now, the interesting thing that happens in a world like that is this, which is that over time, the amount of information that is available for all of us also goes up exponentially. So every day you wake up and you have a bunch of websites that you can go to. You have your content on Facebook. You have your friends sending you SMS on your mobile phone. You still have newspapers. You still have magazines. The amount of information that you are exposed to every day continues to go up. And this is the world in which we live as human beings, but also the world in which brands operate. Brands are trying to reach consumers in a world like this. And this is a lot of what Santosh was talking about. How do you get a message out in a world like this? No one has the time to listen to you, not because they're so busy, because they are inundated with information. Now, I'm going to give you a few Facebook numbers just to put a finer point on this. If you look at Facebook globally, we have about 850 million people on Facebook. And half of those people are accessing on a mobile device. Every single day, 500 million people log into Facebook. Now, those people are creating huge amounts of information through that earlier graph that I showed you. Almost 2 billion posts every single day. That's the volume of information that's being put on just Facebook. And then think about all of the other media that you use, from television, and maybe listening to a little radio and using some other websites. It's unbelievable. Even here in India, we're seeing significant growth in terms of the amount of time and the amount of people who are engaging with Facebook and with other social media platforms. We have almost 50 million people using Facebook in India alone. Now, that's the situation. That's where we are. What I want to talk about in the rest of this presentation is how we at Facebook believe brands can reach through and communicate with the people who matter most to them. As Santosh says, it is about telling stories, and we'll talk more about that. I put this slide up to give an example. The question that we often get asked is people will say, okay, I understand it. Technology is allowing for all of this information and all this connectivity, and that's a problem, but what's the solution? How do you get around that? And the solution is actually very, very simple. It's that in a world where you're inundated with information, the information that will matter most will come from the people who are the most important to you. Now that's very, very obvious, very logical, but that's the way it's always been. If you go sit down with a group of people at dinner who you don't know, and you're talking about anything, what to order for dinner, what color you should paint your house, where your child should go to school, small, large, it doesn't matter. The people you will listen to most when you're having that conversation are the people you know the best. Now, I put this slide up here to give you an example. We have lots of examples like this, and I'm only going to use one today, just in the interest of time. But this is a story that we actually presented at our Facebook Marketing Summit in New York a few weeks ago. And the story here is about a woman named Deb Kodnar, who's in this picture here. And she woke up one morning, and she was having kind of a rough morning because her son wasn't feeling well. And so she took a picture of her son. He had a rash, and she took a picture of the rash, and she posted that on Facebook. She did that just because it was something she wasn't familiar with, and she just thought, oh, well, my son's sick, I'll just put this out on Facebook. And within an hour, a good friend of hers had called her up and said, Deb, you need to take your son to the hospital immediately. And she did. And she took her son to the hospital, and he was diagnosed with this very rare disease called Kawasaki disease. And it's an autoimmune deficiency that affects some blood vessels around the heart that if it's not caught early on, will lead to death. It can lead to death. And the good thing about this story is that because they caught it early enough, her son was treated, and he's now just fine. Now, the point around this story, Deb had lots of friends on Facebook. The important thing was the person she needed to connect to was available. And more importantly, that friend knew who she was because they were using a unique identity service. There are lots of examples about this, around deciding what to do, what to buy. But in this specific point, it was because in a world inundated with information, so Deb didn't go out and type in webmd.com and type in rash and read about it. She didn't even call her doctor. The first thing she did was she said, I should pool my community of friends to see what they know, because they probably know something about this. Now, it's not true in every case. It's possible that none of her friends would have commented on this, and then she would have had to take a different course. I'm not suggesting that every time anything happens, you have to put it on Facebook. But it's amazing how, when you're in a world where people know who you are, and you know who they are, it's very easy to have an authentic conversation, and for information to find its way from the person who has it to the person who needs it. Now, Santosh was talking earlier about Indian cities and the bazaar and how people used to live in a more integrated world. That's the way it used to be. If you lived in a small town, this is exactly what would happen. If somebody were sick in your family, you would tell your friend, who would tell their friend, and the word would get around the community, and someone who knew what was going on would eventually get back to you. But as we have grown, and as the population has grown and we become more distant from each other, we've kind of lost that. And you take that phenomenon and couple it with the explosion of information, and people sometimes feel lost. The way to wade through that is with unique identity. Now, this is my unique identity. This is my timeline. I work at Facebook, and what we encourage people to do when they create their timeline, whether they work at the company or not, is to personalize it and tell a little something about yourself. So this picture here is a picture of, we opened our office in Singapore, our regional hub, and for those of you who've been to China or Singapore or Hong Kong or any of the cultures in Asia that have some, that believe in having a lion dance when they open up a new office, that's what this is about. And it was a fun scenario, and it was just kind of a neat picture. The point is, this is me. I work at Facebook. I live in Singapore. This says a little something about me. And I now have a point in the social graph where all of my friends can come and communicate with me. Now, that gives me a tool to cope with this information overload. It also creates a tool for brands to communicate with me. Brands can also create these points in the social graph. We've always been able to go to a store. We've always been able to go to a website. But as we were talking about earlier this morning, it's not just about connection. It's about storytelling and about communication. So I just picked an example here of Shopper Stop, which is a very, very popular page on Facebook in India. But this is their point in the social graph. And what I want to talk about is how you connect those two things together. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about tips and tricks to make your page more successful. We have a number of those, and I think we talked about some of those in our master class yesterday. But I want to give you the context around how you connect points in the graph from a business to an individual. Now, this is just a representation. So if I'm in the middle of this, I'm that flag. These are all of the people and all of the brands with whom I communicate. Now, if you are a brand, you have to navigate that minefield. How do you do that? You do it by telling stories. Now, this slide is kind of a way to get you in the right mindset to think about that. It used to be, from a marketing point of view, what people would do is they would decide on their campaign. They would say, I want to reach demographics between this age and this age. I want to do it on television. They'd create a budget. They'd hire creative people. They'd come up with this really, really elaborate campaign. They'd do all this work. And then it was a bit like the game of bowling, where you kind of get it all lined up and ready, and then you throw it down the aisle, and you see how many people you hit. And if you did a really, really good job, you'd hit 9 or 10 of the people, 9 or 10 pins. And if you didn't do such a good job, you'd only hit 1 or 2. That's the way marketing used to work. In the new world, where we're all connected to each other, it's really a lot more like this game called pinball, which is where you push an idea off, and then it bounces off of something else. It bounces off of a different person. I gave the example of Deb to talk about how the information from our friends matters significantly. It also matters in the case of brands. What we know is that rather than having a brand talk about themselves, what is even more powerful is if they get somebody else to talk about them for them. And that's what this analogy is about. If you go and create a marketing campaign where you get somebody to talk about what you're doing, it will be more successful for all of the reasons that Santosh was talking about earlier this morning. That's the world in which we live. So what we are seeing is a progression from advertisements to stories. An ad is no longer a simple shout out to get someone's attention. An ad is something that starts a conversation. It's something that gets passed around. It's something that gets morphed and changes. As brands seek to communicate with their individual consumers and users, they need to move from a world where they talk just about what new features they're offering to a world where they also talk about what it is that's important about their brand. Earlier today, we were talking a bit too around things like social connection. For a long time, those have been added on. So a brand will say, I'm the world's best soap, but we also give some money to care about the environment. That's actually not the way human beings work. We now care about a brand for everything about that brand. We care about what it does. We care about what it stands for. And in a social world, people will be able to talk about both of those things at the same time. That's actually not new. That's the way it used to be. And that's the way it's going to be again in this world. I'll give you another example. I didn't put a slide on it because I didn't want to just go through slide after slide. I like to drink coffee. And I'm a big fan of Starbucks coffee, and I understand they're coming to India, which is exciting for me. But my favorite coffee drink is actually a drink that's only available in the fall in the United States. It's a drink that has a holiday theme. It's called a pumpkin spice latte. And for those of you who've ever been to the United States or you know about the holiday we have called Thanksgiving, we celebrate it in November every year. And one of the things that people eat is pumpkin, and so they created this drink that has kind of a pumpkin flavor to it. Now, what I don't know is exactly what date they start selling it. It changes every year. And for a long time, you would have to go to a Starbucks and just ask when the drink was available. Now, let me tell you what they did this year. This year, because I'm a friend of Starbucks, they're part of my community and my social graph, they actually put a post up saying, hey, the pumpkin spice latte is now available. And more importantly, if you come in the next 2 days, you can get $1 off. Now, that was interesting to me because I just told all of you I really like that drink. But you know what I did? I shared that post with all of my friends. Why? Because that drink matters to me. Not because I want to be a brand ambassador for Starbucks. I don't really care. I did it because I like that drink, and I think my friends might like that drink. I didn't do it to get any money. I did it for that very simple reason. Very logical. That's the way people think in a connected world. My friends who saw that post saw a post from me, not from Starbucks. Now, most of my friends know me, and they said, oh, Eric, he likes that pumpkin spice thing every year. Here it comes again. I don't really like it, and they just ignored it. But a couple of them said, oh, maybe I'll try it, and they went and tried the drink. That's a story. It's a story because I shared something that's important to me. something that I value. I share that with people who know me, who are my friends. It's also an advertisement. It's an advertisement for a pumpkin spice latte. So I give that example because I think sometimes we make these big statements. Ads are moving to stories. And you ask yourself, well, what does that mean? That's what it means. It means getting people to tell a little bit about themselves and getting brands to tell a little bit about themselves as well. Now, what I wanted to get very tactical on today, because I hear this a lot. We speak a lot at conferences like this. We speak with individuals. We speak with brands. We speak with agencies because we feel very passionately about this is where the world is headed. We believe that making the world more connected and open is a good thing. That's the mission of Facebook. And we believe that to fulfill that mission, you not only have to connect people with people, you have to connect people with brands and with places and with things that matter to them. And a lot of people say, okay, I can create a page, but how do you do it? And what I want to show you here is how you do that with premium ads. So this is very, very tactical, but I want to make sure everyone understands how you could do this in the case of Facebook. And there are other solutions out there. This is a conference around ideas and brainstorming, and I work at Facebook, so I'm going to use Facebook examples. But I want people to think broadly. I mean, this is the way the future is headed. So let's take the example I just gave of Starbucks. That started with a page post. So what that means is they went out to their Starbucks page and they wrote a little thing that said the pumpkin spice latte is now available. Now they paid to have that show up as an advertisement on the right-hand side of my timeline, of my newsfeed, my newsfeed. I saw that advertisement. Now, with the new premium advertisements, before I get to that. So what we have seen by doing that, using the example that I just gave and others, is that advertisers actually see a 3x ROI. Now, the reason that that ROI is so good is for all of the conversation we just had. We talked about how it is that a brand can take an idea, can take their identity, put it on their page, and then reach through to somebody by buying an advertisement, or as we like to say, telling a story. The ROI is real. Now, I kind of agree with Santosh that we shouldn't be super fixated on ROI. These are new things, and it's interesting. A lot of times we'll get in front of a brand and they'll say, we have a lot of data that says that TV works, and you don't have any data. I present this to say that we do have some data, one, but more importantly, I think we have a lot of data that said that TV worked in the past tense. I'm not sure how much data we have that shows that TV is working today. And my point is that in this new world, it's hard to know what's working in any medium. TV, print, digital, it's all kind of up in the air. So we provide a few data points just to say that we do believe there is some positive ROI, but I agree, you need to think broadly about this. Now, the next thing that Starbucks can do, if they're buying premium, is they can get that ad into my newsfeed. Now, this is very, very important. We were talking about how the conversations that we have and the difference between oral and print and watching TV versus talking to somebody. If I'm having a conversation with a good friend of mine, we can be talking about the weather in Delhi, and then we can immediately shift to our favorite place for dinner. Very seamless, very natural. We do it all the time. Now, it's hard to do that if you're having a more formal advertisement. But this is, as human beings, this is what we do. If I like a particular brand, seeing an ad from them in my newsfeed is no different than me having a conversation with a friend of mine, and they're saying, oh, I like this particular product. The fact of the matter is, the more natural you make it, the more real it is for people, and actually the better the experience is for the end user. This isn't just about building brand. This isn't just about selling more products. This is about making a great experience for everybody who's on Facebook in a world in which the world is more open and connected, and we are all connected to each other and the people, places, and brands that matter to us. That's what this is about. And when you do that, what you see is a huge increase in click-through. This ad here on the newsfeed is actually the same content as that ad on the right-hand side. The reason the click-through is so much higher isn't that people see the ad there. They see it in both places. It's that much higher because the context around it is more natural. That's what people value. They value an authentic conversation, and that conversation will span from person to person, from place to thing, all rolled up into one. This is the way you get through this information overload. You connect in a way that people expect to be connected in the context of their friends. In a world where I can go to any website and see any ad, how likely am I to pay attention to that ad? Very unlikely, because there's so much information. But if I'm in my newsfeed, communicating with my friends, with the people who matter to me, and I see a relevant advertisement, it's much more impactful. And the last piece of this is, of course, mobile. And that's incredibly important in a country like this. It's actually very important everywhere in the world, to be honest with you. But we do have a higher percentage of people in India who are connecting only on a mobile device. And so now you can get that same newsfeed ad that I described earlier. You can get that same newsfeed ad on your mobile phone as well. All the same things, except now you can take it into a place, maybe you're traveling, or maybe you're sitting in an office and you're not with your computer, or maybe you don't have a computer. It just provides that much more access. Now this advertising suite, the reason this works is because of all of the social phenomenons that Santosh just walked through. This is the way, if you are a brand, you take your message and you get it in front of people in the context in which it matters most. Now, one other thing I'm going to say on this, a lot of times, again, when we talk to companies, they come and they say, wow, you have so much data. If you could just give us some of that data, we could serve really, really targeted advertising. And we say two things. We say, first of all, that data is private. We have a privacy policy, so we're not going to share it, which is true. But the second thing, which is almost more important, is that you don't need that data. What matters more is the context that people share willingly on their own. Let me give you an example. Let's just say, hypothetically, I knew that somebody who was coming to my site was in a certain demographic. Let's just assume they're a 25-year-old male. Okay, we just made that up. That's very interesting context around what types of ads to serve. But what would be even more interesting would be if that same 25-year-old male had a friend who was a fan of a certain site, let's say a golf site, and they posted some content from that golf site. What matters isn't that the person is a 25-year-old male. What matters is what they like to do and when they're going to do it. And who knows that best? Their friends. You don't need data. What you need to know is what a community is doing. And a community that's sharing information on Facebook is sharing that very information. It's not about data. It's about the connections that we make as individuals. Thinking back to that example again about Deb, it's the fact that one of her friends knew enough to diagnose this disease. In a marketing scenario, for almost any product you want to sell, there will be a friend who will have a relevant story that you can use to help get that message amplified. Now, these ads work for offers, they work for links, they work for videos. They work in any number of different ways. And I think that the last thing I'm going to say here on this, just to kind of get the conversation started, is this isn't about blasting a message out. I mentioned the bowling alley versus the pinball analogy. It's really about getting people to talk. For a long time, advertisement was about shouting something out. We're new. We're the lowest cost. We're the best, the fastest. And those ads are still very relevant. They work very well. But we know what works even better. What works even better is if you ask a question. If you ask a question to say, why would you care about this particular product? Someone will answer. They will answer, and then they will share that content with others. Engagement between brands and people is what generates this interest, and that's what moves product in this new world. Now, I don't want to overstate it. We're just at the very, very beginning of this, and that's actually what this slide is about. Traditional advertising isn't going away. In fact, I think it's a good complement to what's happening on social. But over time, it will shift, and it will have to shift because of those first two chalkboard slides that I showed you. We think there's a lot of information now, Think about what it's going to be like in 5 years. There is going to be so much information. How are you going to wade through it? How are you going to make decisions? How are you going to decide what to buy, what to wear, where to go? How? You're going to decide that by talking to people you know and trust. And that's what Facebook is about, and that's what the whole social revolution is about. So I'm going to stop here, because I've used up my, my allotted time, and take some questions about this. And I'm happy to talk about anything. I tried to make this very specific, but we could talk about anything that's of interest to you in the audience as it relates to Facebook or social more broadly. Thank you.